Thank you. I just have one thank you I want to make, and that is to my department head, Professor Jimmy Fung, who's a very modest guy and doesn't stand up here. But without his signing the checks, we would not be, or I would not be doing what I am. So I'm very grateful for Jimmy. Okay, now, there's one other bit of the science which I wanted to mention. And this, I always used to thought that Antarctica was a sort of great big island, that all the thing you see there is land. Well, it's not. There's been really detailed work done on scanning through the ice to find out the fact, well, it's an archipelago. It's a whole bunch of islands. And if you look at the the right-hand side as you're seeing it here, there's a lot where there isn't a lot of land near the edge. Greenland, there is land right the way around the edge of the ice cap with only narrow outlets. So Greenland is not going to disintegrate fast. This could. And if you look at the bottom left, what you have is you have ice sheets which come off the continent and have water underneath them. So the warm water gets underneath and weakens them. And then when you have a cliff 100 meters tall above sea level of ice, that can fracture and you can get large carving happening. So this is the one area in the IPCC's reports where they refer to deep uncertainty. They do not know how fast these ice sheets that have come off are going to disintegrate. What they do see is that as they are moving and as they start to disintegrate, so the ice that's on the land is going to start sliding off faster, and we could be in for 6.4 meters relatively rapidly. Overall, it's thought that at current CO2 levels, the equilibrium sea level rise is somewhere between 20 and 30 meters. But that could be in 10,000 years, so it's not something one worries about so much. But this century, we could, the thing that's in is about sort of just below 1 meter by 2,300. The last IPCC report, and they tend to be cautious in these, say, well, if we're really good and we get to the net zero at 2050, then perhaps we restrict it to not much more than the meter. But if we continue with the business as usual type emissions, we could be seeing 5 meters. And the other thing is this whole business of extreme weather. So the variability of the weather from day to day, from year to year, is much greater than the climate change signal. But we are now getting to a point where they can put into the IPCC report how much more likely an extreme weather event is because of climate change, because the planet's warmer. And basically, you have two charts here. You have that blue line. This is just sort of conceptual. That blue line is the probability distribution for a particular climate variable before we started anthropogenic global warming. The brown is how the probability distribution has moved with the planet warming. And then if you draw this vertical line threshold and say, well, extreme weather events such as really severe typhoons, strong typhoons, happen above that line, what's the probability that a particular severe typhoon has occurred because of the global warming? And it's the ratio of the brown area, including the blue bit of the brown area, so that brown area compared to the blue area. So when Dorian went and sat on the Bahamas and decimated them and killed sort of about 90 people confirmed, and there are 270 people still missing, that was deemed to be about 5 times more likely because the seas were warmer, which strengthened the hurricane and various other complicated climate effects than it would have been before anthropogenic warming happened. This is the fires in Australia. There have always been fires in Australia, but they're now more likely because we've got a warmer climate. The drought that's happening, and the World Food Programme is going into Zambia for the first time for quite a large number of years to provide food support because their agricultural production has dropped off due to drought. That is now more likely than it would have been. So this is not theoretical, this is hitting. Now, we had an event on the 18th of October, which HSBC very kindly hosted, and we have put it up on the website You can get the QR code at the entrance. That we've got a little leaflet with it on, so you can go there and you can find out a lot more about the climate science from that. But it's not all doom and gloom. The year before, we had Lord Nicholas Stern come and talk about the work that WRI and others have been doing on the new climate economy, where they are looking at what is the good way forward. How can we both move towards the carbon neutral world and have a better standard of living for everyone? And you can see there the different things that we need to do, leading into, or the different factors that we need to impact, leading into the action that governments need to do, and then the sources of solution: innovation, sustainable infrastructure, resource productivity, private sector action, and applying those to the different areas of energy, cities, food and land, water and industry. Other issues and matters to report. So there are a series of sort of second level but nevertheless important things where there was agreement in terms of gender, human rights, indigenous rights, incorporating them into climate action. There were also other areas of friction, besides the carbon trading wasn't the only thing they disagreed on. So the whole question of just transition and loss and damage. You have some countries which are relatively poor and are impacted particularly by climate change, wanting the rich countries to basically sign a blank check to say that they will pay for whatever damage happens. And who's going to sign a blank check? What is agreed is that yes, there is a problem, and yes, more needs to be done to help the less rich countries who are impacted to strengthen, to adapt, to build resilience, and when there is a problem, some form of insurance mechanism which gets help where it's needed rapidly. Developed countries pledging to deliver their actions up to 2020. So one of the things the developing countries are saying is, hey, you said you would do this by 2020, you haven't got there. We're waiting to see what you do before we go and say how we're going to tighten our NDCs next year. And then the support for the less developed countries. 3 particular areas: finance. Going back to the Copenhagen discussions, there was a sort of pledge that $100 billion a year would be raised by 2020. Where they got to on that? The technology support and the capacity building. On the 100 billion, the OECD does accounting. They go and add up all the possible sources that could be regarded as being climate finance. And in 2017, they get to a number of about 71 billion. But in doing that, as an accountant, I'm not terribly, they're very honest with what they do, but I'm not very comfortable with it, because they take the grant money, which is you pay it once off, that's it, with the loan money. You lend somebody money, perhaps even interest-bearing money, and you get it back later. And they add all those up together and say it's 71 billion. And they don't deduct the loans that are repaid. So it's tricky. And this could be a big sticking point in terms of getting the developing countries to commit to reduce their emissions.